So what did you guys settle on? What did we work
No way.
No, I'm not just curious what made it work.
I got that one as a voice.
Jeff said down, I think in.
Right after I started. And I made me think twice. I was like, no, I guess that's got to be a scam. So I just called back the next day and said,
And by the way,
we have the local sheriff's department to your place of business, you're all arrested in front of everybody. And I was like, oh my God. I mean, like, these guys are really resistant.
Yeah, well, it's there right now.
Okay, let's not touch it.
Okay.
so you like
So hey folks, we're going to try to get going. Apparently we have a bad HDMI cable, and so if this goes away, I can only apologize. But we have a very esteemed panel of three folks who have been intimately involved in the energy efficiency space for a long time. They work together quite closely. They seem to know each other quite well, and there have been a lot of jokes that have flown back and forth as we've been assembling the panel, so I hope this will be a fun one, despite the fact that we're talking about a very serious and important topic. So Frank Melanson is with Eversource and manages their programs there. Chris is with the Weatherization Assistance Program, the Community Action Program that administers the federal Weatherization Assistance Program. He's with Belknap and Merrimack counties and is you're in charge of the Electric Assistance Program statewide?
That one fell in my lap a couple months ago, so yes, I administer the New Hampshire Electric Assistance Program.
And Dana Nute is with the Resilient Buildings Group and is sort of representing the bridge between the public and private sectors as he's straddling that divide. And so without further ado, each of them is going to give a quick presentation. I'm going to take the back seat for a while, and then I'll have a couple of questions to get the discussion going after the presentation, but please be thinking about what you would like to ask these gentlemen, as they know a lot more about this stuff than certainly than I do, and I would argue anybody else around. So without any further ado, Frank Melanson.
And quick presentation is a relative term, but we'll try to speed through it so we can get to the questions. So like you said, I'm Frank Melanson. I work for Eversource, but these programs that we're going to talk about, this Home Energy Assistance Income Eligible Program, is a statewide program. It's offered under the New HSaves umbrella. So all of the regulated utilities plus the New Hampshire Electric Co-op participate in this. We all offer the same program. It's all the same rules, so it applies to customers throughout the state the same. Because Eversource has roughly 75–80% of the service territory, we tend to be the bigger player in the picture, so we always end up taking the lead on a lot of this stuff. Go to the next slide. So for those of you who are not familiar, and I'm sure everybody is, but the electric service territory in New Hampshire is pretty sporadic. It's all spread around. So that gives you a good example of what's available in New Hampshire. It looks like my slide got a little scrambled, but each of those colors represents a different utility. The one that does not participate is this bottom red one, municipals like Wolfboro and a few other locations that have town-owned electric utilities, and they don't pay into the fund that supports these efficiency funds. So we go to the next one. The two gas utilities in New Hampshire also participate in the same way, same program, all the same rules. So it's Unitil over on the seacoast, and then Liberty up the center of the corridor for a little bit. Next. So this Home Energy Assistance Program is what our income eligible weatherization program is called. The approach is we do full comprehensive whole house, looking at the shell of the building from the basement to the attic, as thorough as possible. So the idea is to get in and do as much work that we can do with the programs as possible one time, because it costs the most to get a contractor on site once versus coming back year after year and trying to do it. The implementation of who actually does the audits and does the actual physical work in the field is the Community Action Program. So Chris is one of them. His department at the Weatherization Group, they go out and do an audit. They contact the customers. They do all the heavy lifting. I sit in my glass tower and tell them what to do. It's kind of nice. This gives you an example of the income eligibility for this program. So this chart changes constantly, so that's a rough guesstimation. But a for a customer to qualify for this program, they have to go to a community action agency and get screened for their income. So it's household income. The Home Energy Assistance Program is tried to cast a broad enough net. So we cover the same assistance level as the Electric Assistance Program and the Fuel Assistance Program and the DOE WAC program. But we also added on there subsidized housing to hit a lot of the multifamily, the larger properties in the state. Next. This will give you a little snapshot of the last few years of how our budgets have been and how our spending has been in this program. So the utilities have been operating this NHSaves umbrella of programs since the early 2000s. For quite a few years, it was a good, robust program, but it was relatively level funded at something lower than this. 2016 is where I started this chart. The colors each represent each individual utility. So the way this works is every ratepayer pays into a fund from the systems benefits charge, a little charge on your electric bill. And it's a similar fund on the gas side. All that money goes into a big pot for energy efficiency, and then it gets divvied up back to the utilities based on how much service territory we have. So, like I said, Eversource is the biggest player here, so we usually have the biggest chunk of that budget. But each utility does their fair share, and as you can see, for the last 4 years or so, that money has been growing at a pretty rapid rate. So back in the 2014-2015 stage, the decision was made at the Public Utility Commission that who oversees all this funding, by the way. They wanted to see these programs ramp up to start hitting more homes, and not just this low-income program, but this low-income program gets the biggest chunk of that budget off the top. So it's a good example of how much it's gone up. So as you can see, the difference from 2016 to 2020 that we just finished, it's a 270% increase in funding, plus an even more substantial increase in the number of customers. So this blue lower number, well, the dollar amount, is how many customers, low-income customers, that were served through that year, that budget. Now, those numbers can be a little deceiving because in some cases, like I said, we try to do a full comprehensive look at a property. There are some instances where we can't do full weatherization top to bottom. And there are a few of the smaller utilities that have had, in certain years, had trouble reaching enough customers that qualified to do that full level of activity. So they did some other outreach, like Unitil and Liberty in a couple of years there have done energy kits, where they basically identify a whole bunch of customers who are on their electric assistance program who qualify based on this, but either they were living in a rental property that the landlord didn't want to do work in, or some other reason, and they would put together a kit of energy efficiency products like light bulbs and low flow shower heads and things like that, and mail them out to those customers. So they got something out of the program without having to send an auditor there, without having to go through all that extra upfront work just to find out that we couldn't do any insulation or air sealing or any of the bigger ticket items. So next. So these results are over the last 3 years. So the NHSaves group just released the last 3-year cycle of program that we ran was 2018, 19, and 2020. This gives you a rolled-up example of just this home energy assistance program, what those savings amounted to. So as you can see, there's a fair amount of both electric and fossil savings that come out of these programs. And when you start to relate it into real terms, so for a lot of people, they'll understand that 6 million kilowatt hours is a lot of electricity saved over a 3-year period. But to put that into perspective, that's enough power to fully power 10,000 homes. Same thing with the dollar amount there. That's $1 million in savings on electric bills for low-income customers. And then fossil fuels, similar scenario where there was almost $1 million in fuel savings there too. And now, being New Hampshire, we have oil, propane, wood, pellets, electric, all kinds of different heating sources. So to put it into perspective that people would understand, we just kind of converted that dollar saving number into oil. So that most of the homes in New Hampshire still heat with oil. So if you assume that all of that fossil fuel savings was oil, then it equates to about $1 million in oil bills that they'd have to pay. So for a typical low-income client who's on fuel assistance, and I don't want to steal your thunder, Chris, but fuel assistance provides a short benefit to help a customer get through their heating season. It's never been designed to give them enough heating fuel to heat their house for the whole winter. When they go through a program like this, where we've gone through and tightened up the whole house and made it more efficient, there's a much better chance that they're going to make it through that entire heating season, or more of it, with just that fuel assistance alone. And then what they have to spend out of pocket is significantly less. And what we've found over the years, that a lot of those folks, they never have money to pay for oil. So when their fuel assistance benefit runs out, they turn on an electric space heater, or they turn their oven on, something along that line. And then there's also a carbon impact there, and I remember the stats off the top of my head, and Sam's hiding my screen on it.
I apologize.
So-
61,000 tons, which is 12,000 cars off the road.
Yeah, so if you look at over that 3-year period, the amount of carbon that's been saved between the gas and the electric with fossil savings, that's a lot of junker cars that were just taken off the road. So it's really making an impact in the carbon footprint as well.
Well,
Remind me what my next slide is?
contact information.
Okay, so that's kind of my quick and dirty spiel about those programs. The contact sheet we'll try to get up later, but it's basically one main person from each of the 4 utilities and 2 gas utilities. So if you have a property, there we go, that's not in Eversource territory, in one of the other utility territories, that's the person you'd want to contact. But certainly you can always contact me if you've got a project in mind, or you wanted more questions about how that utility program works. We work closely with all the other utilities on this, and like I said, Eversource tends to take the lead on it and help coordinate with all those other projects.
Thank you very much. Chris is up next.
Yes.
I'm Chris. I'm the Director of the Housing Rehabilitation and Energy Conservation Programs, also known as weatherization, for the Community Action Program of Belknap and Merrimack counties. We're located right here in Concord. The program uses three major funding sources, and Frank, being part of the utilities, that's our biggest funding source, which comes in where we can implement to the low-income community. The other 2 being the Weatherization Assistance Program for the Department of Energy, and the Building Weatherization Program, which actually uses leftover LIHEAP dollars as part of the Fuel Assistance Program. The first slide that I put together is just an introduction to me. It's not very important. It was just my credentials and some of the things that were required, not so much from the utilities perspective, but from the Department of Energy. We're required to carry many different certifications in order to implement the funding to the low-income clients, which leads me to our next slide. It will be the other slide. This one talks about our core programs of the Community Action Program, it's fuel and electric assistance, which Frank mentioned, and weatherization, but I just wanted to put a list there of what some of the other programs the Community Action Program offered. And as Frank mentioned, the first step in weatherization is to become income qualified with the fuel and electric assistance benefits, which sometimes it's not known. Our program, we don't have money for marketing, so a lot of times it's word of mouth. So when someone comes to the Community Action Program for maybe Meals on Wheels, or through Concord Area Transportation, or one of the other 70 programs we offer, it's always asked about their fuel or electric assistance qualifications, and then the next step would be weatherization. You can skip through the next several slides. This is just contact information for, if anybody's interested, I have cards for that. And one of the biggest hurdles that we have in the nonprofit sector, and I'm sure Dana will touch on resilient buildings on the private sector is, as I mentioned, we don't have a lot of money for marketing our programs to our community. We have so much funding coming in that's available for the low-income community, and we have so many people in the low-income community that need our services, but the middle piece is us in the nonprofit world. So the 5 community action agencies in their weatherization departments and their fuel and electric assistance departments, we can't use our federal funding to say, hey, we have this great program for everybody. So a lot of it is word of mouth. We have to talk about our programs by word of mouth. So it's neighbors talking to neighbors, family members talking to family members, and people in my field that try to come out to these things and just kind of bring the message out there. The other hurdle with that is finding qualified people to be in our industry, which is something I wanted to bring attention to. I have, for example, I've had an ad placed. I'm trying to hire more energy auditors. We have to have certified energy auditors come in to go into the client households to perform the energy audits. That way we can use the funding that the utilities and the Department of Energy is giving to us. And I've had an ad placed, for example, for about 50 days, and I have not had one resume. And we're offering competitive wages. We have full benefits packages, long, short-term disabilities. We have retirement plans. We have a really good work-life balance, and so again, part of my reason for being here is just to ask for help and just spreading the word about trying to get people within our industry.
This is an employment workshop. It's an employment workshop. We're trying to get people to work.
Well, if we don't have people to implement the funding to the demand, the programs aren't going to exist anymore. So, we go to the next slide. And again, this is just contact information. If you know anybody who's interested in the field or looking for a career change, that's my shameless plug there. Send them our direction. So, as I mentioned before, the gateway to weatherization is the fuel and electric assistance programs. And recently, I've been handed the New Hampshire Electric Assistance Program to administer that for the state, which obviously is funded by all of the New Hampshire utilities. They're our biggest cheerleader in trying to get the most help out to the community as possible. Does anyone have any questions about how the low-income weatherization program operates in the state of New Hampshire?
Why don't we can have the questions now. I was going to say, why don't we let Dana go, and then
okay.
but it's up to you guys. If someone has questions specifically for Chris, it's a small enough crowd in this room that I don't think we need to adhere to a rigid structure. But if no one's chomping at the bit, why don't we just have Dana hop up, and then we'll just start talking afterward.
If you want a job, you want to make money, come to me. Get them on this.
We have good life-work balance, though.
Yeah. Cheers about that.
Remember, we're going to throw around a lot of acronyms, so if something isn't familiar and you want to know what it means, just please speak up.
And it's a pleasure meeting my friend here, Noah, who was building an ark, but he thought he'd come in today, so. We do make fun of each other. You can just go on.
I'm not the one who's all gray.
Yeah, well, I earned it. So, what we do, Museum Buildings Group, is we work in NHSaves, Frank's program, and we do a lot of energy efficiency strategies. Envelope improvements, mechanical improvements, ladder improvements, excuse me, and case studies. And in the home energy, we do it with the low-income people. And we cover 100% of the improvement cost. Excuse me. Must have been that sandwich.
You said that.
Do you think any good things? Go on to the next one.
Sure.
And just go on to the next one. So in weatherization, not going to talk about your stuff, but we do air sealing, insulation, windows, weather stripping indoors. Next one, please. And these are just pictures of attics, which he just showed anyway, and pipe wraps and everything like that. Excuse me. We install boilers, controls for lighting, install hydronic heat lines, excuse me, replace electric radiant systems, and variable frequency drive pumps. We're just finishing a project downtown right now on this high rise. It's a variable frequency drive heating system. It's going to cut their electric heating right in half. So, and we can run everything from the computer. And the lighting, we do all the lighting. We change the LEDs now, and occupancy sensors, and we can go to the next one. And this is like a project we just finished. All LEDs. It's like in the grocery store. You walk down the hall, the lights come on one at a time. Saves a lot of electricity. We've done a lot of case studies. This is the one we're doing downtown right now, the high rise where we have the units on top. This one is run by solar. And Scott and Williams, we put in a combined heat and power system there. And what that does is we make their hot water and a byproduct of electricity, and we cover 100% of the electricity being made right there. So, Stafford House, I'm just going through these fast. What we did is, you can't see it, but we have the solar on top of the roof. That covers about half of their electric use. See?
Sorry.
This is what I call the combined heat and power system. Again, we're making all the domestic hot water here, and the electricity is the byproduct. And again, as I said before, we make just about 100% of their electricity. Again, this is the one we're just doing downtown. Just last week, we set the units on top of the roof. So they've got actually they got 116 units now. They added some. So we're going to save them about $43,000 a year in electricity bills. And what are we going to do next? Well, we do a lot of LED lighting, the control systems we do, and the heat pumps. As you've probably seen around, here a lot of, we're going to electrification, so getting away from fossil fuels, going to electric heat. And that's it. So.
All right. So thanks everybody for the presentations, and I think I'm gonna start the conversation here, and I think that I'm probably not alone in assuming that there are a lot of folks who fall through the cracks, right, in the programs that we have that exist, and so maybe we could start by talking about that. You know, who are we reaching with our programs for low to moderate income customers, and who aren't we, and you know, where could we do better in finding these folks, and maybe Frank, you could start, and we could move on to Chris after that.
Sure. You know, for the most part, what we're doing really well at hitting are the low income end of it. The CAP agency has a good system in place with years of history of folks understanding that they go to a CAP agency when they're struggling and they apply for fuel assistance and they apply for the electric assistance program. For the most part, with our HEA program, that's really where we're pulling most of our projects from, are those folks that when they sign up for fuel assistance, there's a checkbox on the application that says, I'm interested in weatherization. Historically, that has been for the WAP program, the federal WAP program, but when the utility program came into the picture and provided the same kind of services with a much larger budget, it allowed CAPs to go into more of those homes and to go deeper. The place, the next step from that, those are mostly single-family residences is where we're pulling a lot of that from. Like I said in my presentation, part of our income qualification we added was for subsidized housing. So that gets us into the multifamily arena, where we've been doing a significant number of projects with housing authorities throughout the state, with private land developers or management companies that manage income-eligible homes. So anything that's like Section 8 easily qualifies for this. And that's, Dana's had a big part in that, having connection with all those housing authorities and bringing people in. Now, we had trouble getting into that market initially because the general kind of idea out there is that why would the electric company want to help me save money? And that's kind of the biggest question we've always gotten since the inception of these programs.
They assume it's a scam.
They assume it's a scam. It's, you know, somehow you're trying to get information from me, or you're you know, my bill's actually gonna go up, or this, you're trying to get me to pay my bill. You know, our energy efficiency department at the utilities is really a carved out separate, we have nothing to do with collecting on your electric bill. The original purpose of these funds that came in were to lower the growth rate of the electric usage on the grid for New England. And that's been very successful. And then with all the advent of solar and other additional, it's helped slow that curve down. But the funding has kind of transitioned into, you know, a savings program. So it's not the utilities money that we're spending, it's customers' money. So we're benefited as being the person, or the entity that's allowed to help those customers, and because they're our customers. So the utilities have a good relationship with, you know, everyone has an electric account or has a gas account. So we have a connection there to start with, but it's that hurdle of getting over the idea that it's real is what was difficult. So an individual homeowner, because they were funneling through a cap agency, and a cap agency is a trusted, you know, partner in that environment, they're used to getting benefits through the cap, they would easily sign up and they'd go through an HEA program, and half the time they had no idea that it was this HEA utility program that paid for it. They just knew that they were getting services there. On the multifamily, it took a lot of effort of convincing housing authorities that this was real and to give us a chance. As soon as we did a couple of projects, that word spread like wildfire, and now we have people banging down the door trying to get to us. I think the piece that we're still struggling with is the moderate income. And part of it is just the way the funding is structured. This funding is, for the utility program, is allocated for income eligible up to a certain threshold. So we go up to 60% state median income. It's probably the higher level threshold if you don't count subsidized housing, which has its own methodology. Between 60% state median and 80% median is what is typically accepted as moderate income. And the utilities recently got a RGGI grant, a Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative grant, to try to develop a pilot to serve those moderate income people. So we have a program that's market rate, it's called our Home Performance with Energy Star program, that does the same kind of weatherization on homes, but the customers have to pay for a portion of it. So there were plenty of people in that middle band there that were not poor enough to qualify for those income assistance, but were struggling to make ends meet and couldn't afford what would eventually pay for itself in terms of savings on their heating or electric bill, but they're living day to day. They're worried more about paying for their medication or putting food on the table, or in some cases, their cable bill, which doesn't make much sense. But that's the reality of it out in the world there, is that people have their own set of priorities for that. So it's that moderate income band that's been kind of missed out of this. And honestly, we've been trying to implement that moderate income program for a couple of years now, and it's struggled. Because once you can identify someone in that band, they're harder to identify, because you can't just approach anybody and say, you know, if you give us your financial information, we might be able to help you. That's got scam written all over it. And we have a hard enough time, like I said, as a utility company trying to convince people that these programs are real. The cap list that they have are primarily the folks that income qualify for the low income side. So we were able to pull some from there where people who went for assistance and just missed that threshold and were a little over income. But then it was another hurdle of trying to convince those customers that this is a real opportunity. And then once you get some of them to convince it, they can't afford the moderate copay that's involved. So our moderate income program was going to pay for everything that the low income program would cover at 100%, would cover at 80%. And it's a phenomenal deal still, but for someone who's worried about whether they can pay their medication or take their child to a doctor when they have a fever, is not thinking about even a couple of $1,000s to fully insulate their house, replace their heating system, their refrigerator, all this great stuff that's going to help them make their home more comfortable and more energy efficient and save them money in the long run. And that 20% copay could easily pay for itself within a year. But if you don't have the money up front, it doesn't matter how quickly you're going to get it back. There's just no opportunity there. So that's the band that I think we're having a hard time reaching.
Chris-
But like the cap agencies were saying, we don't do much advertising in this program. So it's kind of word of mouth, and it's done really well over the years with just pushing through that cap list. There's a question in the back there?
Yeah, I know that in efficiency in Vermont, they have some programs to help with the payment and doing like zero interest payment over time. Is that something that's developed in Eversource?
Yeah, we do have financing options available, not in the low-income program because it's fully paid for, but for the market rate program and for the moderate income program. For moderate income program, it was a 0% interest, but you still can't get people to even loan to borrow money for it. And then there were also credit issues with some folks. So we tried to partner, the utilities are not a bank. So we have some funding available for, and it's called an on-bill financing opportunity. It's a limited amount of revolving fund that we have, and as people have used it and pay back into it, we can loan it back out again. But for the most of our financing in that market rate program is through arrangements with banks and credit unions where we buy the interest rate down. So they will give a loan at their standard rates and we'll buy it down to 2%. And then in some cases for the moderate income, we buy it down to 0%, but the customer, the client still has to qualify credit-wise for the loan. And that middle band of moderate income people are the ones who, like I said, are struggling, so oftentimes their credit rating is not ideal for a loan either.
Could you speak to low income who are renting, and also some lower income that are renting don't see the need to get weatherization even if they've been in the unit for years? And the landlord, does the landlord have any way to assist in getting that weatherization for them, or if the tenant doesn't want to bother, then the landlord's just stuck?
No, we try to service rentals as well as owner-occupied as equally as possible. Certainly, the landlord can sign up for the program. It's the tenants have to be income eligible, so they'd have to cooperate a little bit to at least, if they're already on fuel assistance or electric assistance, and the landlord comes to us and says, I want my building weatherized, we'd look at those tenants, and if they were income qualified, we could do that. In the same vein, if it's a tenant that comes to us and wants weatherization, the landlord would have to approve it, have to sign off on it. But we're actively engaging with larger landlords, with property management companies who are operating, like I said, subsidized housing, or even the smaller, triples and quads that inner city that have a lot of low-income clientele. If at least half of those tenants are income eligible, then we'll serve the whole building with that program. So in a multifamily aspect, in a building that's more than one unit, it doesn't make sense from a practical standpoint to be able to effectively insulate or air seal one apartment without the rest of the building. So they're too interconnected. And particularly in New England, where a lot of these smaller apartment buildings are really large individual homes that have been cut up and made into apartments. So they're so intertwined that you can't effectively treat them. But we will work with a landlord to get their tenants on board. We work with tenants to get their landlord on board whenever possible.
I just want to drill down on this question a little further, though, that what I'm hearing is you're seeing great uptake. You feel like you're reaching a lot of the low income customers, but you're not necessarily having to advertise to fully subscribe programs. So I guess the question is really, do we know how many income eligible customers are out there, and do we know what percentage of them we serve each year or have served overall?
That's a tough question to answer. So depending on who you ask and how you calculate it, you'll get very different numbers of how many low-income clients are out there. People come and go off that income qualification constantly, so it's a very moving, revolving number. And the same thing with how many of them have been served or weatherized already, because they're not all permanent location homeowners. So a lot of these rental properties or even individual homes, people move around a lot. So we may have weatherized that home, and then that income eligible client moved somewhere else and knew about the program, so signs up again, or another low-income client moves into that home or unit that's been weatherized, and they want to sign up, but it's already been done. So it starts to get a little convoluted trying to figure out that. I mean, all that we can agree on is that there's a huge need out there in New Hampshire for low-income housing and for weatherizing that low-income housing as much as possible.
But are you, a couple things, are you oversubscribed, and if not, when you send out electric bill every month, it just seems like that could really be easy marketing tool.
You'd think so.
You know, to get, you know,
Yeah.
how you present it.
So this HEA program has oversubscribed every year. I think one year we came in like $100,000 short on a multi-million-dollar budget. So most years we'll go over budget whenever possible. So like I said, we have in the NHSaves suite, there's a whole bunch of other programs. They all have individual budgets. This HEA program has a specific budget that has to stay with HEA. But those other budgets, if they don't spend it, I can pull some of that money and spend it in HEA and go even further. So we've never really had an issue with getting enough or not having enough clients to meet our goals. The biggest kind of limitation factor is the workforce of actually doing this work, and which Chris alluded to a little while ago. There are only so many qualified auditors who can do this work. There are only so many qualified installers to do the installation of the air sealing and all that. That's an industry that's struggling to keep up with the money that's being pushed into this field for weatherizing homes.
Also add that there's a lot of, New Hampshire's known for an older stock of houses and really need help. A lot of the multifamilies that I bring to Frank, you know, they're from the 70s, all the public housing here, and they really do need help. So there's a lot of stock out there.
And to your point about we send out electric bills every month, we've regularly put bill inserts into all those 4 programs. We don't typically do it for this low-income program because, like I said, we've been fully subscribed or oversubscribed regularly. We do it oftentimes for our market rate home performance program, but even that has very little return. You know, and a lot of folks now are no longer getting paper bills; they're getting the bills electronically. So for those who still get paper bills, when I was getting a paper bill and I worked there, I would open it up, look at my bill, throw out, recycle all the rest of the stuff that was in it, not even look at it. So that's, I think, the downside is, yes, it's quick, easy, cheap marketing that we can do, and you do utilize it whenever possible, but we get very little return on it.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity. My name is Nute from Efficieny. I'm the Director of Community Solar Initiative. So in this capacity, I work with low moderate income clients. So this discussion is so much interest to me. The question I have is some of the challenges that we have been facing. So how do you navigate a situation where a housing authority, for example, the tenants are paying their own rent? You know, it's much more easier for us if the authority itself does pay the rent. So it's easier for us to build a system. So how do you navigate that kind of hurdle? Because I saw that in the main discussion topic. The other question I have is, can you commute or convert the electric assistance funds into some kind of funding for solar projects for these low moderate income tenants as part of your program? Is this something that you can do?
So for the first question, when we're dealing with larger multifamilies and housing authorities, and even smaller landlords, the carrot for them, whether they're paying the bills, the heating or the electric bills or not, is that they're getting improvements done to their property. So in the long run, they're going to benefit from that regardless of whether they're getting payback on how much their electric bill drops. When it's the tenants that are paying the electric bill, it's an easy explanation to them that their electric bill is going to go down or their fuel bill is going to go down for this. But when it comes to the landlords, it's talking to them about the improvements to their property in a lot of these cases where they're either paying for the heat or not the electricity, or they're paying, a lot of the subsidized housing authorities have everything kind of lumped together. It's certainly an easier discussion with a housing authority or a property owner when they're paying all those bills. But when they're not, it's still the angle that we try to take is that, this is improving the value of your property. It's making your tenants more comfortable. You're less likely to have turnover on tenants. We've targeted for years electric heat in this program because their heating bills would be so astronomical. And any landlord that had an apartment building with electric heat always lost tenants. The first winter somebody's in there, they're out of there that next year because they realize how expensive it is to heat. So that would be the angle that we'd go to that landlord and say, you're seeing a lot of turnover. You're getting clients coming and going. You'd much rather have a stable environment. If you do this weatherization work, it's going to lower their heating costs, their electric costs. They'll be more comfortable. They're not going to pay as much. They'll be more likely to stay there long term.
Chris, I wonder if you'd be willing to try to field the second question. We had a conversation a little while ago in which you said we have to start using the S word for solar. But obviously your abilities are pretty strictly prescribed by the programs that fund you. So maybe you could talk a bit about what opportunity exists and what policies would be needed to start doing that.
I think it's going to be just more interest in it. We have to be vocal about it because I'm sure the utilities would probably be more. They want to move towards more solar than, say, the Department of Energy would. But I have seen some things come through from the Department of Energy about entertaining low-income solar. But I think it's just in the early stages right now, and we don't have any further guidance on that. But again, like Sam said, I think it's something that needs to happen because the solar right now, it's marketed towards people who can afford the initial investment. And the low-income side is, they can't afford to pay their bills, let alone want to invest in something such as solar. But, the paybacks with solar could be really beneficial for the low-income community, especially housing authorities, with the large buildings where we're putting in, efficient electric systems like heat pumps and stuff. Solar could really benefit that, and I know Dana will probably be able to speak further on that. But I really just think it's getting the word out there that we just have to change. I think when you look at some of the southwestern states, obviously they have more the heating climate than the cooling climate. So solar is much bigger in a cooling climate than it is a heating climate, but it's still beneficial here. Even the three months we have in the summertime, it could still be very beneficial. But again, we got to get the word out there and just try to make sure there's just more awareness about it because it's going to need to happen.
Well, and for those who don't know, the state has a low to moderate income solar program that adds a penny and a half to your electric rate if you income qualify. But my understanding, and this might be Jude, this might be a better question for you to answer, is that it's hard to find the customers. You have to prove that they're income eligible, and that's part of the struggle, I believe.
Yeah. So that's the big issue. But currently, the kind of solar project that is actually making high positive returns on investment is actually the low moderate income solar project because of the 2.5% adder. Sometimes when we model the project, it doesn't pencil financially, but when you add that same 2% adder, then it shoots up the value. And the earlier question I asked about, because we are working with some housing authorities where the tenants are paying their own rent, and the housing authorities really want us to build a system for their properties. But when we run the financial, because we cannot connect behind the meters, it doesn't really make financial sense. At that point, it's not going to the tenants, so that project cannot be classified as a low moderate income project to attract the 2.5% adder. And so we don't usually go for it. So that is why I'm asking if it is possible to convert the electric assistance program to for us to develop, projects for low moderate income in a situation where the tenants are paying their own, rent.
And I think the answer to that is that the answer is no, because you'd have to change the policy.
It's not just the policy, but it's legislation or PUC rules
Yeah.
that establish that fund as a payment on their electric systems. And same thing with like the fuel systems with the federal money, that's for just paying for fuel. And we've often talked together that some of that fuel systems money would make more sense in weatherizing, so that you're fixing your problem, not just throwing more fuel at it. Same idea with the electric assistance, that in a perfect world, it makes sense to put that towards solar to provide them with electricity instead of just helping them pay their bill. But it's a bigger policy question than any of us have any control over.
What I do is, when I do these housing authorities, I get them a community development block grant. We use that money for solar on them. So, I mean, that's one of the avenues you can.
Yeah, I think I'll talk to you later about that. Yeah.
Other questions?
Might be a two-part question, but then potentially for you, Chris, from the CAP perspective. On one hand, have there already been a lot of examples where demand for weatherization projects have not been met because of the workforce pipeline issues? And I guess the second part there, are you working as a CAP, are you working in collaboration with private installers and auditors, or are they all in-house?
Yep, the first part of the question is yes, we have our biggest hurdle, and I touched on that earlier, is we have so much funding, we have so much demand, but we have so few of us to implement that funding to the demand. So we do have what's, for lack of a better term, we do have production goals, from our funders to say that we should be hitting this percentage of the low-income community, we have this many dollars to spend, and this is how you have to spend it. And sometimes it's impossible to get there because, just for example, my community action program, my weatherization program is a staff of 6 people, and that's including myself and an administrative assistant. So we have to hold the BPI certifications in order to use the federal money, which it takes 2 years to get that. And it's, that's a hurdle in itself. Some people just get bored of it. They don't want to maintain it. They don't want to get CEUs to maintain the certification. So that's a big hurdle on its own. And then the contractor base in the state of New Hampshire, many of the contractors, they're just not, they don't have the time and the resources to adhere to the program guidelines. If we were doing strictly work for the utilities, the guidelines are a little bit more lenient on what we install for insulation and air sealing measures and energy efficiency stuff. But when we're talking with the federal money, everything has to be cost effective. It has to have a benefit to it. Again, they have to income qualify. And then it has to go out and be inspected by certified inspectors. And then there's quality control on top of that, which has to go out to a third-party inspection. So there's so many moving parts. And having so few people in our industry, it just makes it really difficult to reach as deep in the community as we could. What was the second part of your question? What was the second?
I think you answered it.
Oh, with the contractors, yes. Yeah, there's just not enough. There's not enough qualified people in our industry to do it, and that's why we're really just trying to get the word out there to say it can be lucrative. You can earn a livable wage doing this, and you can have benefits, and you can support your family, and you can have a good work-life balance, and you can learn it, and it's ever evolving and ever changing too. So it's also not boring. It's not boring at all.
And I can elaborate a little on his response too. That in New Hampshire, the 5 CAP agencies, there's only one CAP agency that has their own in-house crews that do the actual installs, blowing insulation, doing air sealing. That's Tri-County Community Action that services the 3 northern counties. The rest of the 4 other CAP agencies, including Belknap and Merrimack, they do the audits in-house. They prepare the plan of what needs to get done, and they oversee the work, but they're all subcontracting out to private contractors. The same contractors that do our home performance program and there's not enough of those contractors out there to go around. So it's a fairly shallow gene pool, shall we say, of those qualified contractors, and everybody's trying to use them. So right now, we've got, backlogs of several months to get projects insulated, where it used to happen in a matter of a couple weeks.
What I see is a lack of communication to our educational institutions and a lack of advertising that this is a career choice for young people. We are losing our young people to move out of state. This is an incentive program that maybe we should be talking to our technical colleges or starting at the high school level and trying to drum up business. Go and talk to people, because there are a lot of young people who do want to have a good job. They want to have a good home life, and there's some flexibility here. But
we have been actually addressing that for several years, because we saw that curve of funding going up, knowing that we'd have to do some workforce development. We've been working with community colleges, we've been working with high school tech companies, trying to develop that drive to pull those workers back. But it's a lot more complicated than that, because this industry is competing with people who can make $18 an hour stocking shelves at Lowe's, or at the grocery store even, or $15 an hour flipping burgers at McDonald's. When you start to really look at the actual work that happens to make these programs happen, the auditor piece is a little easier to incent people that it's a good career to be into. It's hard to get to that level because of all the certifications and the time education that it takes. But the actual installers that are in the field, where we have a bigger shortage of, those are hard to get people to do. Because if you had your choice to make $18 an hour stocking shelves in air conditioning at a store versus being in a cramped crawl space, sweating with a mask on, pulling insulation up over your body, it's a no-brainer for most folks. So it's been very difficult to get people into the trades across the industry, but this weatherization trade portion of it is a very narrow band of specialized skills that's hard to get people into that for. So the utility programs have, in our next 3-year program cycle, have carved out a chunk of budget and a plan for more formal workforce development that will hopefully help bring more qualified people into this field. But it's a long, slow, gradual process. There's no quick fix. We've recently increased all of our rates that we pay for in these programs to give people like Chris more money to work with, to pay better salaries, to try to attract people. And it's still, he's had positions open for a long time, and he's not the only cap agency. Almost all the cap agencies that are trying to do this work are trying to hire, and they're trying to hire qualified people or even interested people who are trainable that they can work with to get them the skills and certifications they need over time. And there's not enough bodies out there that are interested.
I've partnered with GDS in the community colleges, and we were recently given the award for that contract for the workforce development. So it's going to be going over the next 2 years, and we're going all the way down to high schools. That's what we're doing. We're going to have to do it that way.
But it's still, there's no quick fix to it.
No.
takes a while to train.
It takes a while to convince people that this is a good career to be in.
For instance, like electricians, the master's electrician's license, 85% of the master electricians here in this state are over 60 years old, 55 years old. It's a dying breed, so we got to start them young.
Well, and what I've been hearing is that you get into the trades, you might start doing weatherization work, but then very quickly you can get snapped up by somebody who's spent installing $25,000 kitchen upgrades, and you're like the guy who's picking up bent nails on that job site, and it's just much easier work. So it's
or I'll steal them.
We're really competing with the new construction boom that's going on.
Yeah.
So that's a big piece of it. There's a lot of the qualified, already trained, skilled folks would rather work on a nice, brand new, clean construction site than an old, dilapidated home that they're having to go through. So when, I hate to say this out loud, but when the housing boom slows back down again, and there be more of those construction workers looking for, carpenters and plumbers and electricians and all that, looking for more work, we'd be more likely to be able to draw into weatherization. But right now, it's been competing for the small pool of qualified people.
One of the questions that is prompted right now by legislation before the New Hampshire House is this question of what is the appropriate portion of the New Hampshire Saves budget that should go towards these low to moderate income customers. When I'm hearing that the programs are oversubscribed every year and there are other parts of the program that you can take money from to fill in the work that you need to do, it does make you wonder if perhaps this section of the market should get more of the funding. I don't know if you want to weigh in on that question or if that's
a loaded question.
Yeah.
Yep. We've struggled with this for years because the percentage of money that gets pulled off the overall budget to low income has increased over the year. And like I said earlier, one of the limiting factors right now is not so much the money as the workers. So when opportunity arrives, I like having the flexibility to say that this program over here isn't spending its money. I have the ability in the low income program to go more. I'm going to take it and use it. But if we were pushed to put a lot more of that funding just on the low income budget, we just wouldn't meet those goals because there just aren't enough folks out in the field being able to do that work. We have we try to work in every year a little wiggle room to do additional projects that aren't, and I don't know how to phrase this without getting myself into trouble, but because it takes a certain amount of time to finish a single-family home or a multifamily project where you're going in and dealing with landlords or individual homeowners, that scheduling and all that takes a little bit of time. So we always keep it in our back pocket. We've got this wiggle room that we could also do special projects with the low-income funding that service nonprofits that serve the low-income community. So like homeless shelters and soup kitchens, things like that. So if we're getting close to the end of a budget cycle and we've got this backlog of work that we can't get completed in time in order to spend all that HEA money we have, we can usually pull in some of these special projects that they're a lot easier to get in. You're dealing with one entity, you can get in quickly and do all that work and have a great project with good energy savings and good spending there to use up part of that budget. My biggest concern until we resolve the workforce issue is just that if we throw more money at that program, we're either going to just end up paying everybody 3 times as much as we do now, or we're not really going to serve any more customers. So that's, and it's also an issue of fairness for the customers who are paying into the fund. So right now, the way it's dispersed out, the PUC tries to make it equitable to the folks that are paying into the fund. So this isn't, everybody in the state pays into the fund and then it all goes to low-income clients. A lot of it has to go back to the same people that are paying into it. And the commercial programs pay, commercial customers pay into this fund as well. That HEA amount gets pulled off that overall overarching budget. So all that money the commercial folks pay into it is substantially more than what the residential pay into it, but the low income already gets a fairly substantial chunk of it off the top. So, I started at Eversource almost 19 years ago running their low income program and building it up from there. And I've always been very passionate about wanting to spend more money and serve more of these clients, but the reality of it is that there is a ceiling, and you've got to be practical about how much money you can just keep throwing at it without it really solving the problem.
Other questions? How are we doing, Stuart?
I had a general question, I don't know if there's an answer to it. Does anybody have any information about rental properties? What percent of them are in need of energy efficiency improvements? I mean, I know in a town of Dover, about 40 to 50% of living units are rentals. We don't have an idea of how many. And the other question maybe is energy efficiency being taken into account for most new building construction, mostly, or
So, you know, as Dana said earlier, that most of our housing authority, larger multifamily properties are quite aged. They're getting up there in years. We have made a pretty good effort of going through a lot of them in the last 5 or 10 years and upgrading them. Unfortunately, some of them, those buildings built in the 70s, are not conducive to weatherizing. You know, they're high-rise brick, concrete buildings. There's limitations to what you can do to really make them more efficient without being way out of whack with cost effectiveness. You know, you'd almost be better off tearing the building down and building something new. There is no, that I'm aware of, there's no good statistics available out there for New Hampshire that shows how many properties are in that multifamily batch and how many we've actually served. We keep beating the bushes looking for more and more projects every year, and they keep coming. So my gut says there's still a fair amount of those properties out there that could use some improvements, and then we're going to continue to work our way through them as much as possible. In terms of new construction, there are definitely code, the code improves, the New Hampshire building code gets better every year, but it's quite a few years behind. There are some communities that have been better than others, like Durham adopted the more recent, more stringent building codes, but a lot of other towns in New Hampshire have not. And some of it's just the nature of living in New Hampshire. We have a lot of towns that don't have code officials. So there's a code that's in place that you have to build to, but there's no one there really verifying, inspecting, and you know, builders are going to build what they can build. It's definitely a better environment than it was like in the 80s when the housing boom there. People were just slapping up buildings, and you were hopeful that you got any insulation. And actually, I was swinging a hammer in the 80s, so I know firsthand some of those homes that were just thrown together.
There's a number that's sticking in my head that I don't know if it's accurate, but I believe when the Lynch administration put together the climate action plan, they're aiming for weatherizing 30,000 homes a year.
Sounds right.
And I'm fairly certain we're nowhere near that number. But you all might know how many we're doing a year.
You know, I'm trying to remember my slides, but the last couple of years we've certainly made a huge improvement in how many per year. But it's still in the like 3,000-4,000 homes a year range in the low-income realm. Combined with the market rate program, it's 4,000 or 5,000 homes a year that get full weatherization services. And you know, I think there's something along the lines of 600,000 homes in New Hampshire. Some of those are newer, not necessarily, but there is a lot of old housing stock, like Dana said. So it would be a fairly huge undertaking of a survey to try to determine how many of those homes are out there, how many of them haven't been weatherized, and at what level of weatherized. You know, because we're at the point now with these HEA program where we're starting to circle back to some of the homes that went through in the early 2000s with this program and having to do them again, particularly in the low-income program, because you know, the reality is that the upkeep and maintenance on those homes doesn't happen quite as well as it does in the private sector. So you get a roof that fails, and then all that cellulose that we put in the attic gets soaked and ruined, and now they have no insulation effectively.
Dana, I wonder if you could talk about new construction a little bit, and just because so the Resilient Building Group, for those who don't know, does do the type of work that we've been talking about today, but also does certifications like passive houses and LEED certification on new construction. Obviously, that's a tiny segment of the market, but you're out there. What do you see in terms of how we're doing on new construction?
Well, like you said, the code has changed. We watered it down a little, as usual, here in New Hampshire, the 2015 code. But a lot of them now are, like I said, going to electrification. You know, heat pumps, heating with heat pumps. But you got to have the best envelope for those. Otherwise, it just goes out the window. So it's doing well. It's doing well. We could do better, but I think overall it's okay.
It's changing.
It's changing, yes.
Yeah. And one of our utility programs is a new construction Energy Star Homes program, which has been very successful, and it's building a lot of really high-performing homes. And we actually, in the last couple of years, we've had a program called the Net Zero Challenge, where these builders that are building these high-performance homes are all competing with each other to build as close to a net zero home as they could possibly do. And we've had several that have met the net zero criteria. So it's happening slowly. It's still an expensive process, more so than just getting a home built, which is, some of you may know, it's pretty expensive to build a home now, period, but then to build it to that high performance level adds to the cost.
And last year, we just finished up in the Upper Valley, the multifamily net zero building, that's good.
So there are tax credits for if you install solar with some towns. Have you ever heard of a town giving a tax credit for net zero or meeting other energy efficiency goals?
So the solar tax credits are federal. There's
Okay.
a state rebate, but there's less and less money in that fund, so you have to line up early if you want a state rebate.
But there are towns that give a rebate, not a rebate, they give a lower tax. They lower your tax. if you
Yeah,
have
so
solar
there are,
panels.
yes, there are towns, yes, sorry. There are towns who've signed on for that, and,
Yes.
and so, yeah, sorry, it wasn't aware of what you're talking about. And basically they lower the taxable value of your home based on the installation of the solar panels. And I actually don't have a list of those towns top of mind. Does anyone know?
Yeah, if you just go online, you will see some of them, they have a map. Some of the towns actually allow 100%, others maybe 50% on your installation cost. So it depends on a given town. I don't know whether I have the opportunity to ask my questions. Yeah, so to Frank, I know you guys are doing very impressive work with the low moderate program recently. The utilities came out with a very nice document put together that you are required by the PUC to undertake some project within your territories. I'm just thinking, those of us who are working in the solar energy space, we see you as our partners. And some of the things that really make a project expensive is the interconnection fees and all of that. So assuming today we are going to build a project for the sole benefit of low moderate income, would you try to consider, waiving some of those expenses to make it pencil for them?
You personally, Frank.
If it was up to me, yes. Unfortunately, I'm not that important at Eversource, but there has been more attention being paid to the solar industry within the utility industry.
Yeah.
Our sister companies in Mass, Eversource in Mass, has been a little further ahead of the curve than New Hampshire is, but I think eventually we'll get there in New Hampshire. But right now, there's just too many regulations on what we're allowed to use funding for, and what, for the fees that we collect on things like that are so that the rest of the customers paying their electric bills are not going to end up paying for that as part of that overall cost of doing business. So I don't know whether that's going to happen or when it would happen, but it's certainly something that's kind of on the horizon potentially as solar gets more and more popular. But I have no control over doing that.
So we're about at time. We'll let you all go to the cookie break. Cookie and coffee, more cookies, more coffee. There's one more panel left. If anyone has remaining questions, I encourage you to grab these folks afterward, or myself. I'm happy to. In particular, Jude, I think I have we have some talking to do. But thank you all very much, and a round of applause for our. I was going to say you built my parents' house, so you may be nice.
They could. Yeah, so you have to first verify that. So
I don't have Carroll County now. I only developed.
We first have to verify online there.
Throw all five of them up there.
And it has to be on that first.
I have a lot of them. Oh, yeah, I just gave a big project.
Right now, it's
over 100 kW to
pretty long backlog of
it's,
projects that are.
I'm just doing it now, it's low income, and it's, we did all the consulting on it, it's very high efficient, it's gonna be.
obviously,
tried to make it
work
next year.
schedule they were out on it.
You didn't have enough for one month, and you didn't have enough like
Given the backlog of work, limited workforce that's out there, it's taking at least 6 months. In some cases,
anytime I get it, done project,
because of,
keep it right.
we have such a pipeline already in place for right now, I think it's sort of
So what is like your territory?
We almost went there ourselves.
I saw you on the list.
Bob Irving built our house.
Okay.
And it, you know, it worked out for
Yeah, you know, the previous years,
something simpler. You guys make beautiful homes that are just slightly out of but that's the market.
I mean, yeah, this is the first one, I'm still waiting.
It's hard, and I don't blame you. The reason the only reason we were able to make it work because we built the shell.
You've also done two projects
So we got
region community development.
Yeah, it's a little confusing. but-
Yeah, I'm on the board.
Yeah, no, I'd be curious to hear what the split was for people who joined.
2x4 stock, like all sorts
Being
of
on my
stuff.
business, being on the board, I push them towards energy.
Do they have it?
Yeah.
Yeah, the main salon.
Now we can't. Now we
is
can't.
smaller.
All house projects. In fact, I started to stop seeing it. Just like, why would I buy it?
January?
But I got to. So what's
No,
your?
nothing major.
Yeah.
I'm trying to get ready to sell my house, so I'm slowly picking away at cleaning the back out, the basement, getting everything.
It's a big project.
Years of junk.
Yeah, because they just developed.
A little over 20
You don't have to, they pick one year in a row.
Yeah, yeah, there is, unfortunately. My fiance was in
Because as I've come
putting off.
sort of like
Until my son was out of high school, he's in college now, so started his first
often
year.
history.
WPI.
We have nothing. In fact, it's called
There's nothing at all, that's why I say.
Yeah, yeah.
We just
They
need
do.
to
They do.
Trying to make the house sell.
I think we really need to get on board with that.
It's an interesting.
Yeah, and it's the perfect time for me because I can sell high and I don't find a house.
Thanks.
Yeah, it's my retirement.
Good luck with the cleanup project.
Yeah.
And I agree with you, like, the awareness is low, and people are not really aware of. Especially the low voltage solar incentives, we don't know about the 2.5 and others. And that is what is really working. You really want to get people to focus on investment. Yeah. Can you have a
I do, yeah. Technology disasters.
I'm all right. How you doing? I
Yeah, sure.
don't know if you saw, but there was the issue that we were talking about last time you were in office. Sort of has a bill, study commission being put together about assessing of energy projects. And we are. It's not quite. It's not clear if we're going to have a representative. But I mentioned to the prime sponsor that month one on the job, I've got members who are asking about this. He's like, well, and you guys are doing it. Hopefully we'll have a voice.
Well, so we're actually back 1,000 gallons.
Oh, great.
I'm not really
Three
involved.
projects going, two of them we've already won, Cornish
The
Rocks are going to
weatherization.
Yeah, I've heard. So that's what I'm.
that was a nice presentation.
At the time, he said I shouldn't spread that too widely, but.
Well, but it looks like, I think they had to respond by yesterday, and when
Yeah.
they responded, their man just dropped it.
Oh, good. That'd be good.
Well, they don't understand a chance. I mean, when their assessor came out and said, we assessed that this, they went, I don't care.
Yeah. Love it.
Yep. We found another one, we had one in Windsor, David went to a meeting, and they asked the assessor to explain how he got to the numbers, and he suddenly realized that he had used the production number instead of the system size number.
Of course.
Right? It went
Of
out in
course.
public, and everybody went, oh.
That's ridiculous.
So we're doing pretty well.
The
Is that the kind of person that you're looking for?
It's just come on, we don't need to spend this time.
Yeah, that's
The
what we
more
look
interesting
for.
thing is,
And again, it's
okay, so you guys have overcharged us
I mean, we just like to get people in the
$90,000.
door, we keep
Yeah.
them up
How are we getting that money back? Oh, we're not
And if we
getting
can,
the money back.
you know, if they can get a career out of it with us, that's great.
Really?
Sometimes
Yeah.
they just,
Think so?
they kind of do that and then they find something better to do.
It just needs some stability.
yeah, well, and I think honestly, it's sort of like it just needs a little bit of attention.
Oh, at Academy?
And it'll get it right. And it's unfortunate, but it's I forget who it was who.
In fact, some of our, we've done
said it this morning.
volunteering
I think it was the keynote this morning. She said, "You don't want to be the first."
Oh,
you
that's
want to be the
awesome.
third."
That's
You know, like, we're sort of
Nancy
still in
Parker,
that
they're not
first
together anymore.
cohort here.
Oh, really? Yeah,
First
that's
three
fine.
and
Yeah,
out.
when I
Yeah.
first started at Parker,
It's good to see you.
Good to see you too. Sorry for your woes.
That's all right.
they were together.
You should go get it.
Yeah. That's funny. But yeah.
Hey, handsome.
How's it going, Sam?
Good.
You know, I'm curious
Can I
about
have your thumb drive?
doing that kind of work.
So I know I took over a little bit and talked a lot. Those guys kind of.
Yeah, I mean,
I wish it was like a shocker having talked to them one-on-one. They're all
open to the idea of.
They did it one-on-one.
Yeah.
Get them up in front of the
Yeah.
crowd.
ridiculous.
Yeah.
I feel like we're looking.
We were joking personally. I think Dan is hitting
Really
puberty.
passionate about it.
Voice is changing.
All my free time working.
Which is so funny because he's such a ham, you know.
Well,
Yeah.
if it's any
But
consolation.
it's all right,
to
right?
you,
Like
yeah,
people
you know,
respond
when we have,
differently to
people that are interested
different
and we,
things.
you know, all
It's
paid
understandable.
trainings and we pay for all the
So,
things we use,
thanks for doing it. Yeah, if you hadn't been, I don't know what we
Energy
would
out
talk
west,
about.
just wanna
Yeah,
say
we're
one-
dragging inches out of people.
Yeah, all the people
No, I'm happy to do it. I miss doing this kind of stuff. I used to do a lot of it.
somewhere for a weekend,
Presentations and talks
and,
with
we get
groups.
all
Yeah.
our, continuing
Had time or
education units and
the ability to do it
we
lately,
hear
so.
about
Yeah, well, let me know if,
all over the
you know,
country that-
if you ever want to like do a webinar with us about something, if there's something that's coming up that you guys want to try to promote, that's the kind of thing we'd be happy to work with you guys on.
So, yeah, I mean, all the.
At some point in the near future, I'd like to, when you guys have a new president,
Like I said,
we should have a conversation with your boss about how we could get to you all being a member.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah, and that's another thing that's way out of my
Yeah,
realm.
it's true, but I was just planning to see it with every Eversource employee that I talked to. I saw Kate was in the back taking notes for a while, and then she left, which either means you're fired or
Yeah.
she thought you were doing a
She's
good
checking
job.
up on me.
Yeah.
So once you get up there, you can kind of.
No, I think she was just trying to float around and
Yeah.
hear as much as
Again,
she
it's
could.
always
Yep.
something new to learn.
Yep.
So, I mean, if you're ever interested.
Cool. Thank you, Frank.
You're welcome.
See you.
Yeah, I am.
Yeah.
I'm definitely planning on finishing this
Going home?
school year. But I'm here kind of second.
I might need to get a snack.
For sure.
Does this start at quarter of?
I think it starts at 3.
Oh, wow.
Oh,
Tons of snack
congratulations.
time.
Yeah,
Geez,
I'm on shift right now, but
Yeah.
I'm really interested in potentially moving.
Check the old email.
Mm-hmm.
I'll give you two, you can hang on to
Let's
those if you
see.
want. One of them's the recruiting.
Right.
It sounds fancy when we call it recruiting, but it's just basically a list of our, career openings. You can peruse them at any time, just kind of see what they entail.
So so you mentioned like you posted this position for an auditor.
Yeah, it's been up to 50 days. Yeah.
And is this someone that needs that certification beforehand, or is this someone you're just like looking for someone who's interested in this that you're going to train?
At this point, just looking for people that are interested because there's so few of us out there that are certified. Dana steals them all, and so we all just bounce back. You get fully certified, so
Okay, right back.
Once you're licensed and certified and all that stuff, you can go anywhere you want.
You all set? Do you have any questions?
Certification.
Right. Yeah. So it's just
This projector only minimally works, unfortunately, so hopefully it'll screw us up.
Dude, you said BPI?
Yeah, the Building Performance Institute. The Department of Energy requires us to have specifically the Energy Auditor certification and the Quality Control Inspector certifications, which in order for us to use that funding, we have to have that certification because you need to sign up on that job and say these federal dollars actually went where they were supposed to go. And it's not a difficult certification to get, but it's very monotonous and it's very tedious, and it's the same information over and over, and you can't just go in and take the test and pass it. You know, you have to know that. You can't BS your way through it because all the tests are proctored, so you can't cheat, and there's live field exams too, so you're actually doing, up to a 4-hour live field exam in front of a proctor with a camera, walking your way through all of these diagnostic tools and equipment, heating systems, and it's a little intimidating at first, but I mean, once you know the information, it's just